Hi, my name is Mac Lake, and I'm the Leadership Development Pastor at Seacoast Church in Charleston, South Carolina. My aha moment has to do with leadership development. For years I used to say with conviction, there is a leadership problem in the church, but I don't believe that anymore. Our churches are filled with leaders. They're entrepreneurs, managers, supervisors, coaches, principals, teachers, even parents, people who lead on a daily basis. So I don't think there's a leadership problem in the church as much as there is a leadership development problem in the church. My aha moment sort of started when I came to Seacoast as leadership development pastor. I was so excited because I was overseeing the Wednesday night leadership classes. These classes followed our leadership pipeline, leading yourself, leading others, leading leaders, leading ministries. We had classes for all levels. And so we would make an announcement that we had these leadership classes at the beginning of a semester, and people would sign up and they would come, and we had several teachers for these classes, and we did this for a couple years, and then I really began to get frustrated with that whole approach. It's what we call the program-oriented approach to leadership development. And when I was getting frustrated with it, we started to look and really begin to evaluate it, and we saw several drawbacks with this approach. First is distance. People who are coming to your church from 45 minutes away, they're just not going to come back in the middle of the week for leadership development classes. And then there was busyness. Nobody had 100% attendance to these classes, so they would miss critical elements in their developmental process. Another drawback was timing. We would start these classes in September, and we would run them through November, and inevitably God would send somebody to come along in October to say, hey, I want to be a leader, and you know what the answer is: come see me in January. So that was a frustration. Another drawback was relational loyalty. Our pastors were doing a great job identifying potential leaders, sending them to these classes, but then our teachers of those classes, our leadership experts who were teaching these classes, would spend 8 to 10 weeks pouring into these potential leaders. And at the end, guess who they were loyal to? They were loyal to the teacher, not the pastor that they would be serving under. Another drawback to the people or program-oriented approach to leadership development is self-selected leadership. We would make the announcement and say, hey, we have these leadership classes, and people would sign up. And unfortunately, many times, it wasn't the people that needed to be signing up. I mean, they had good intentions, but that was not their next step. Leadership was not their next step. And then the last drawback that we saw was artificial learning environment. I like to say, if you want to teach somebody how to swim, you don't put them in a classroom, you put them in a swimming pool. If you want to teach somebody how to lead, you put them in a leadership situation alongside of another leader. So these were our frustrations. I was banging my head against this thing, trying to figure it out. Then one morning, I was having my devotions through the book of Ephesians. And I read Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11 and 12, where Paul said this: He has given prophets, apostles, teachers, preachers, evangelists to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. And when I read that, God sort of got my attention and said, Mac, really look at that. And I looked at it and read it, and I was like, God, I know that. I've studied that verse. I know that it's my job as professional clergy to do leadership development and equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. But then it's like he spoke into my spirit and said, go back and look at that again. The prophets, the evangelists, the preachers, the teachers, Mac, those weren't paid staff. Those were lay people. And that's when it hit me. That was my aha moment. So I paraphrase that verse now. He has given leaders to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. And we begin to ask the what if question. What if we took Ephesians 4, 11 and 12 seriously? What if we begin to decentralize our leadership development efforts? What if we looked at our campus pastors and we said, guys, we want you to identify, recruit, and we want you to develop the next campus pastors. And our staff, we want you to identify and train our next staff members. Our coaches, we want you to identify and raise up the next coaches. Our small group leaders, identifying, recruiting, and training, raising up and mentoring the next small group leaders. So we got excited about this. When we put the math to it, that's when it really got exciting. We said, wow, we've got about 10 campus pastors, probably 30 pastors at that time, 40 coaches, 300 small group leaders. What if we empowered them and decentralized our leadership training efforts and empowered them to mentor up potential leaders? That was over 300 potential leadership developers out there. Now, we know everybody wouldn't do it, but what if only 25% did? Boy, that could change the culture of your church. So We did away with our program-oriented approach to leadership development, and we moved to what we call the people-oriented approach. We took all those classes that we were doing in our leadership pipeline and we put them online, and we looked at our leaders and we said, we want you to identify somebody under your flow and enroll them in one of these classes, let them do a session, you meet with them, debrief what they learned, and give them a challenge, give them an assignment in the context of your leadership environment. And so that's how we begin to move towards this mentor-based approach to leadership development. We call it a high-tech, high-touch approach. We're using technology, but there's a person tied into it, so it's mentor-based as well. Let me tell you the advantage. When you do it this way, you can do it anytime, any place, any pace, with relational loyalty, in a real-life learning environment, and it's leader-selected leaders, not self-selected leadership. So that aha moment caused us to do a total paradigm shift in the way we do leadership development. So let me give you a few takeaways. A few things to consider. First is this. Find some ways to decentralize your leadership development efforts. We've made leadership development too church-centric. And that's not how Jesus did it. And that's not how the early church developed leaders. It was mentor-based. Second, don't focus on building leaders. Focus on building a leadership development culture. When we only focus on building leaders, once we get enough leaders, we stop developing leaders. Build a leadership development culture. Today we talk about putting people in our leadership greenhouse to grow them up. We want a leadership development culture. Third, think transformation rather than information. I'm afraid churches are infatuated with information, dispensing information rather than producing transformation. We've got to remember it's not leadership development if leaders aren't being developed. Fourth, be aware of the new movements in leadership development. There are some great technologies out there. Take advantage of it. And finally, be patient. Remember, leadership development is messy. Thanks so much for letting me share my story.